So, hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Street Entrepreneurship. My name is Arv Punt, and I just got back from the Coding Coffee event in Philadelphia. So, our guest today is perfect. Today we have Miss Andelyn Russell, and she is a recent Wharton PhD graduate in applied economics. Congratulations, by the way. And she's currently working with the Offensive Office of Evaluation Sciences, or the OES. And prior to Wharton, Miss Andelyn Russell was a research assistant in health economics at JPAL North America, and she also completed a bachelor's in operations research from Columbia University. So, welcome, Ms. Russell. I'm super excited to interview you, and I know students everywhere will love hearing your story and the path you followed with your future plans. So, nice to meet
Hi,
you.
well, nice to meet you too. Thank you for the warm welcome. Seems like a great podcast, and I appreciated receiving your message. I'm always happy to chat about my career path because I did the exact same thing. When I was in high school, when I was an undergrad, and pretty much every stage of my career, I've reached out to
Yeah.
people who are a couple steps along the way, and that's always been helpful.
All right. So great. Okay, so let's get started. So, our first question to you is just please tell us about yourself, your background, where you grew up, and how you ended up being interested in economics and what is applied economics, especially at Wharton specifically.
Sure. So, my brief background is I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. My parents are small business owners, so they were already hardworking and entrepreneurial, and I got those qualities from them. So, I worked extremely hard in high school. I took the most difficult classes that I could. At the time, that was like Calculus 3 and linear algebra. I did a bunch of clubs and activities like Model UN and Science Fair. And so fortunately, I was able to get a wide exposure, even as a high school student. I went to a public school that was very large. It was 4,000 students, so my graduating class had 1,000. And it was while I was in high school that started to think about what I should do for my career. And I really wanted to find the intersection of the technical and the social. So I was very good at math and science. So I had this aptitude for engineering, and I also loved problem solving. I had taken coding classes as well, but I was also passionate about international relations. Um, and just cultures in general. Like if money were no object, maybe I would be an anthropologist. But I wanted to find a way that I could satisfy that curiosity and also make a good living. And the intersection that I had found was humanitarian logistics. So I had wanted to study operations research as an undergraduate with the application of optimizing systems to humanitarian contexts. And that was my goal, when I applied for undergraduate programs. And fortunately, I got into a great set of schools and chose to go to Columbia. Um, and so my undergraduate was in operations research, and they didn't have any professors that were working in humanitarian logistics. And so I had to get creative. And I think you're always rewarded in life when you strike out on your own, with something new.
Yeah.
That when you're at it for a long time, and you show your sincerity and that you are genuinely willing to make the investment, people will respond to that. So I actually found that there was a book on humanitarian logistics, and the book was written by a professor, Luc van Wassenhove, who was at INSEAD. INSEAD is a French business school, and they have a very strong operations management department. And after reading his book, I just sent him a cold email saying, "Hi, I am an undergraduate at Columbia studying operations research. I would love to be a research assistant for your lab group over the summer." And he didn't reply to my email. And that often happens. Professors are incredibly busy. I mean, a lot of professionals are as well, but don't give up. So I went to my undergraduate advisor and I asked him, like, can you please reach out to this professor on my behalf, so I could work for him over the summer? And my undergraduate advisor did. And sure enough, this Professor Luc van Wassenhove at INSEAD, he replied to my undergraduate advisor because it was clear that I was serious about this. It wasn't just like sending a spray of emails out to everybody. That not only had I reached out, but when I didn't get the initial response, like I made an effort to follow up and yeah, in a way that he could understand that I was very serious about the opportunity. So fortunately, then I was able to spend a summer working for Luc van Wassenhove's research group. I didn't work with him directly. I worked with a postdoc of his, Nathan Kunz, who is still a humanitarian logistics professor. And I really respected the field. The project that I was working on, it was in partnership with a large humanitarian organization in how they managed their vehicle fleet. So they had like 1,000 vehicles all over the world, and trying to understand like how to optimize their vehicle maintenance, and trying to see were there any insights that we could gather from the data to help them manage their fleet more effectively. And that's when I started to get exposure to economics, is that some of the questions that we had wanted to answer about the data were causal in nature. Like we wanted to know, okay, does one set of like vehicle policies, like what is the impact of it, and not just the correlation of it. And I didn't have the skills to do that. So as an operations research student, I hadn't taken econometrics. And so as soon as I went back to Columbia, I took an econometrics class. And so it was getting more of that exposure to economics. I realized I really liked it. And I also liked the set of questions that economics answered. So humanitarian logistics, they do incredibly important work. But this work is a lot of it is around optimization. So like how can you manage a fleet of vehicles for a humanitarian organization effectively? Or after disaster, how do you allocate supplies to a disaster impacted area most efficiently? Yeah. When I was starting to be interested in like, okay, after a town is recovering from a disaster, how do you reestablish, the community and an economy in a way that they won't need long-term delivery of supplies? And those were more economics questions. So having decided that I was really interested in economics, I applied for research assistant positions with top economists, and was fortunate enough to receive an offer from Amy Finkelstein at MIT. She was a health economist. And while I was there, working for her, I realized I really liked it and that I wanted to continue on in economics. And so I applied to economics PhD programs and went to Wharton. And so this is a very long way of answering your question about like what the difference is between applied economics and economics. At least at Wharton, it's the same thing as economics. So I basically have an economics PhD. They just needed to call it something different because Penn already has an economics PhD in the economics department. So it's in their like graduate school of arts and sciences. They have an economics PhD program. But then they also have a set of economists who are working in the business school who are like, hey, we would like to mentor PhD students as well. We'd like to set up our own program, but we just can't call it economics. So we'll call it applied economics.
All right. Okay, that's great. It's a very long story. Yeah.
I know, a very long story. I'll try and keep the answers more succinct.
It's great. So yeah, I guess my next question is like in the modern world with now AI everywhere, how did you deal with that at Wharton, and how is it impacting your current work?
So at Wharton, AI only started to become more prevalent towards the end of my PhD. So I think it was ChatGPT came out in fall of 2022, and I remember that like when it burst on the scene. And when it first burst on the scene, it was still like it was incredible, but had noticeable flaws. Like I had asked it like, what is love, and it like couldn't give me an answer. It said like that does not compute. Versus if it's incredible the rate that AI has advanced, and there's been a lot of writing on that. And so towards the like very end of my PhD, I was using just AI chatbots to help with coding, with data analysis, but there was no like Claude Code or Codex. So
Yeah.
I think nowadays you have researchers who are running their whole pipeline with AI. Like the AI agent will
Yeah.
go download the data, it'll come up with the research question, it'll make the tables, it'll write the paper. And it's funny, a couple of these AI generated papers I think have gotten through to top journals.
Wow.
Yeah. So the answer to your question was AI really didn't impact the end of my PhD all that much. That humans were still in control, but that situation has now it's now in the process of being changed. And then in my current work for the U.S. government, so there is a big push to expand the adoption of AI across agencies. Um, a lot of there's just a ton of different agency initiatives. So, for example, I'm in the General Services Administration, and I think there's a team of programmers who are trying to create an AI chatbot to help federal contracting officers answer compliance questions with the federal acquisition regulation. So the federal, I could talk a lot about federal
Yeah.
procurement, but that is not the focus of this interview. Um, we do, so within my team, we don't have access to a lot of AI tools. Um, they have what's called GSAI, which is a portal for us to access chatbots. That was Gemini, Llama, for Meta, and then used to be Claude, but now in the federal government, we're not supposed to use Claude
Yes.
anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then in our Google suite, there's Gemini built into it.
Mhm. All right. So not so much in your Wharton work because I guess yeah, it came out a bit later. So my next question would be, could you tell us a bit about OES specifically and what does it do? How did you find out about it, and how did you get a job in OES?
Sure. So, the Office of Evaluation Sciences, we are an evaluation and behavioral science group within the US government. So, one of our activities is helping agencies fulfill their obligations under the Evidence Act. So, back in 2018, Congress passed a law called the Evidence Act, which required federal agencies to conduct evaluations, and so to see if there were programs and processes were working. And I should know exactly how evaluation is defined, my bad, but a lot of what we do are randomized control trials, also called like A/B testing in tech, where we'll help agencies test between two different mailers or two different call scripts for call centers. So one of our premier projects was actually working with a uh, suicide and mental health hotline, where our office, they rewrote the initial like call landing script, and we're actually able to increase connectivity and between callers and agents just because of this change of script. So yeah, so we help with evaluations and then using social and behavioral science expertise. So we're the nudge unit within the US government. So in the US government's communications, are there ways that we can make it clear to people? Are there ways that we can encourage voluntary actions? For example, I think in some federal programs, or even to the IRS, you need to report, or the public, they're supposed to report their wages. And a lot of people, they don't update them when they should. So I think one of our projects was to design a message that would go to people who it's expected that they would need to update their wages, but they haven't. So saying like,
Yeah.
hey, we need you to update your wages. So that's essentially what we do. I hope that was what you're looking for.
Yeah, yeah, that was great. So then I guess we can move on to the next question. So in a simple description, like economics is the study of decision making because of due to scarce resources. So in your view, what is scarce in 2026?
Garrison in 2026. So time is always scarce. It's interesting. The more technology we have, I think the expectations of what we are supposed to do just keep increasing. So, like John Maynard Keynes, I'm pretty sure he had predicted that we would all have 4-day work weeks because of technology, and that did not happen.
Mhm.
Instead, our productivity is just expected to increase, and attention, of course, is very scarce, and that's what a lot of tech companies are competing for. It's like how to get the most like clicks, likes, engagement, views, and on an individual level, that matters to us as well. It's what we focus on becomes what our day is like, and it influences our decision making. So time and attention, I think, are two very scarce things that we have control over, and of course compute. So I've heard a lot in the news.
All right, that's great. And my next question, building off of that, is I guess what skill do you feel that we need today in the labor market? Because like as a teen or as a high school student, me and my classmates are like told to learn new skills, and the agenda basically changes every day. Like some days, like people may say, like learn coding, and then the next day, like, now do something else. And then another day you go back to like, oh, we need to do more coding or stuff like that. So we get a lot of conflicting advice and we're not exactly sure what to like follow, I guess, if you want to say. So, and we also don't know like if someone is paid to say something or someone's just saying it out of their own, truthful or moral values. So teens like feel lost because of these conflicting advices and it's just and it feels untrustworthy, I guess. So who do you recommend we listen to and how do we like combat that, I guess, in a way?
Yeah, that's a really great point. That a lot of people, they do come at it with agendas. So I've heard of, say, CEOs going on business channels and making statements just to impact stock prices in their favor. So I am not paid at all. Also, my whatever I am expressing does not represent the General Services Administration. I guess I should include that disclaimer. Um, and you're right that I've seen the whiplash where when I was in high school, which I graduated in 2012, so it's going on like 14 years. Um, like we were encouraged to go into tech, like to do coding, and that there's no jobs in the humanities. So if you want to get a good ROI for your degree, go as technical as you can. And now, of course, with AI, there's been a shift in the opposite direction that developers are getting laid off because AI agents can do coding really well. But then there's the AI threat across so many different careers. Like people are saying, oh, lawyers are under threat or accountants are under threat. So I do think it's still important to have a technical foundation, not just for coding. Um, I think having a basic understanding of coding, will help you understand, AI systems. That even if you aren't actively working on them, to know how they're structured and even coding terminology is always useful. So even though I did my undergraduate in engineering and did not become an engineer, I became an economist. Um, I was able to talk to engineers because I
Yeah.
used to be one, and I knew what they went through, and like we kind of had this empathy, because of that. But also, even in um, if I needed to ask like an engineer to send me a data set, they would use the terminology of like SQL and records, versus in the social sciences we would say like observations. And so it helps me like overcome this language barrier to have a technical background, um, and also any profession, it teaches you how to think. And so as an engineer, I gained really strong problem solving skills, and those skills are always going to be valuable, no matter what you're working in. I think what young people today, um, it's important to build resilience. Um, and that was like a hard transition for me, like going from schooling to then being in the work world, like as a research assistant, but then as a PhD as well. In that, when you're, say, in high school or an undergraduate, you have very short term projects. Like the
Mhm.
longest project you'll have is like the end of the semester, and you are going to get rapid feedback and like precise feedback.
Mhm.
Um, but then when you make this like shift into the working world and also the research world, you're on very long term projects. And I mean, same with like working on a startup.
Mhm.
And and you're not getting like as regular and structured feedback.
Yeah.
And especially as a kid, so I was like a straight A student, very motivated by pleasing my parents and my teachers. That that was like an important source of motivation, was like that external feedback.
Mhm.
And so I think teens today, it'll help prepare you for like for the work world to um, find that motivation within yourself, and just like it could be what you're interested in, um, and also yeah, to learn not to take things personally. So as a student, trying to please my teachers, I took their feedback very personally. um, and yeah, you'll, as you go along the road, and you have projects like that don't work out, it takes resilience to push through that. um, and what else was I going to say for teens? And I think just being curious, as I mentioned at the start, and like when I wanted to pursue humanitarian logistics, that it wasn't just like a passing curiosity. Like I took those steps to pursue it.
Mhm.
And I think whenever you invest in an area that you're interested in, and we actively go in that direction to like do a project to like lift it off the ground, you're going to learn things, and you're going to you're you're going to have something to talk about. You're going to have something to show for it. And it takes a lot of like resilience and persistence to like strike out on your own and do a project. And I think that's increasingly where our world is going. Is the trend has been for a while of everybody being kind of entrepreneurial in their own way. That way back when, or maybe like during the 1950s, there was the idea that when you graduated your undergraduate, you would start working for a company and you would just stay with that company, and you'd be loyal to that company, and that company will be loyal to you. And then when I was an undergraduate, that had started to break. But there was the idea that, oh, you had to stay at a place for at least 3 years. Um, and after 3 years, then you could jump to another company. But pretty soon that evaporated entirely, where you see people in Silicon Valley, they are jumping like every year to a
Yeah.
different company. There isn't that loyalty to a company, but also at the same time, companies never had loyalty to people. And so your personal brand and your personal skills are becoming more and more important. And so, yeah, tying back to my point that was it increasingly valuable is to make things that are yours, either building skills that are yours and projects that are yours, and it could be in any direction, but as long as you are motivated to do it, and really dig into the details and have a product to show for it, whether it's like making a podcast or building a website, like some side project, but you have something to show for it. And yeah, that's like the way I think this world is going. So
All
you're
right.
doing
Yeah.
great.
That's great. And my next question would be continuing questions from students like us. Uh, so for what is your advice for like students who want to pursue a PhD like you did? And specifically for like students who are interested in business and entrepreneurship, like we don't hear that much about PhD in business and applied economics or even finance. So could you please tell us like what is the exact path, or a rough idea of what the path is and who should pursue it, and should we all pursue it because maybe just the PhD just doesn't get enough attention that it deserves maybe in like 2026?
Yeah, sure. So I will say, as mentioned, even though I was in a business school, my program it very much was just an economics, PhD, and so there's other business PhDs such as in management and finance, in accounting that I really don't know is much about them. So I can only speak to economics PhDs and like what the path is in order to get one. So um, for the most part, I just recommend doing what I did is getting a research assistant position, with a professor. So assisting with their work, attending meetings with them, seeing what they comment on, what they choose to pursue, their judgment calls, the types of projects they work on. That really gives you the primer on is academia something that I'll enjoy. And it also helps with your applications as well. That PhD programs are incredibly competitive, and they've only gotten more competitive as a lot of the federal funding has been cut, and so many PhD programs are just not admitting as many students. And in terms of who what a who it makes sense for to do a PhD is somebody who wants to do cutting edge research. So research meaning you're at the frontier, you're trying to answer questions that either nobody else has answered, or you're trying to answer them in a better way than all the people before you. And the most opportunities to do research are in academia. So, of course, there are companies, that are doing amazing research, and so you have people who are leaving PhD programs, especially like in computer science, and they're going to Google and they're going to NVIDIA. Um, but aside from computer science, in most other disciplines, the you'll have the most freedom and flexibility to do research, like when you're in academia. So I'd say those two together, like do a PhD if you love research, and then also if you are interested in doing that research in academia, where most of those opportunities tend to be.
All right, that's great. And my next question would be, what role do you think technology is playing on specifically labor markets in both the US and even in developing economies as well?
Technology.
Yeah, technology. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that's a very big question.
Yeah, I guess it's
Philosophical.
very broad, but if you want to like focus on, some specific aspect, you can go for that.
Sure. So I'll first describe in the US, and that I think overwhelmingly technology has made our lives better. That we're able to connect with people, we're able to have unprecedented access to information. So across the board, like whether just googling random questions or looking up health information. And of course, I don't endorse people using chatbots to look up health information, but they do, and it can give you great answers. Where an example I just had is I got a blood test, from my primary care provider, and I got the results back, and his only response was all good. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And so then I took the results of this blood test and I put it into Claude, and it was actually able to give me a much more detailed explanation. Like that was a very concrete example of how, Claude was able to expand access to information about my health. The problem, like with technology, and I think societal advancement in general, is it forgets the millions of years of human evolution. And I do think it's important, for high school students and anybody to like start to really think about the way that humans have evolved over millions of years and what our lives looked like for millions of years. Because our bodies were physically optimized, for that lifestyle, which technology has completely upended. So a big one is socialization. That humans are social creatures, and for millennium we were in very tight knit tribes, and our survival depended on the tribe and how like close knit it was. And so when we feel lonely, I think in like hustle culture, um, there's a tendency to dismiss that. I was like, oh, just like, focus on your work, or like, oh, that seeing friends is somehow an indulgence, when it was actually, necessary for our survival. And so that's why we feel loneliness, is because it was this like survival mechanism that was ingrained in us like through evolution over millions of years. So don't feel bad about it, and listen to it, and like meet your friends, and um yeah, and just like understanding I could go off on a huge tangent about human body language, because I actually find it like very important and fascinating to understand.
Yeah.
But also just in like the chemicals in our environment, that um in like the past 100 years, like we've introduced like all of these different chemicals that were never present in our environments and in our bodies for millions of years, and we don't understand the impact of it. So a brief way to wrap up is just to say that I think overall technology has it has helped humanity, but there's ways in which it conflicts with the ways that our bodies have developed for millions of years, such that technology, whether digital or through the development of compounds, that we don't understand, and we haven't taken into account, and so we need to study that, and be cognizant of it, and also to just like use common sense as well.
Mhm.
That unfortunately there just isn't the money right now to like do randomized control trials of every single new thing in our environment. And so it requires a lot of introspection to realize like, okay, I've been scrolling for like an hour. Like, do I feel better after this?
Yeah.
And that could be telling you, like, if the answer is no, that perhaps this isn't something that's healthy for me. Like, even though like there hasn't been a randomized control trial, double blind
Mhm.
study about it.
Yeah. All right, that's a great answer. And my lastly, if you had to do it all over again, meaning like your decisions toward your career path, what would you do differently? Like, what would you want to change, maybe?
Yeah. So there's some tangible ones, in my career. So um, I, of course, like was really interested in humanitarian logistics, and because of that, I studied operations research. Um, the research degree at the undergraduate level, though, I didn't understand, was more of a survey of a lot of different areas. So I took some computer science classes, I took some optimization classes, and I think actually just studying computer science or statistics, that would have given me um, that would have helped me more later on. I do think you can't go wrong having a technical background. That it's always easier to go less technical than more technical in your career. So even though I did not study economics as an undergraduate, but because I had an engineering degree, I still had the technical chops where I could then do the technical work of economics. So I went in like the less technical direction, and had that flexibility. And yeah, and also doing an engineering degree, it signaled that I was smart, that I could handle it. Um, I I also I don't think I would have rushed it as much. So I was a research assistant for a health economist, and I really liked the work that she did. but I was interested also in education and development economics. And I thought, oh, I could just dig into those during my PhD. When instead, since I didn't know what I had wanted to do, like during my PhD, I wish I had maybe spent another year as a research assistant for a development economist, because I would have been able to understand the context more and like how that type of research is done, and also have spent the year building connections that I could then leverage during my PhD. That I think a PhD, a lot of it ends up as being timing. That you could have two people who are on growth paths, and like somebody starts here and they like grow like this, and then somebody starts here and they grow like this.
Yeah.
And so they have a higher rate of growth, but then they still don't reach as far just because they started off at a lower place. So yeah, I think I would have been able to get further in my dissertation work had I, because it was in development economics, if I had been more experienced in the discipline and spent that extra year. But I do think, yeah, especially being an undergraduate, in a competitive school, it's almost like a race to do like as much as you can, as fast as you can, and you don't want to trip and you don't want to take extra time because like that'll put you behind. And that's also something that's hard going from, say, high school and undergraduate to more of the work world, is the demands on your time and the potential for what you can do, they just explode. And you reach a limit like that there you physically cannot take on anymore. And so then it comes a matter of like managing your time strategically, and like what are the efforts, or like what are the initiatives that I should focus my time and attention on. And also, when is the time when I will like strategically just like dig in and hang back, like lose the battle to win the war. So instead of like rushing to do my PhD and like, oh, I'll figure it out during my PhD, I wish I had like lost the battle. Okay, spent another year as a research assistant. So then as a PhD, I would be like much better prepared to do an impactful project at a reasonable pace and thus win the war.
All right, that's perfect. So thank you so much for your time. It was a great interview, great advice. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, happy to talk to you. I hope
Thank
it was
you.
helpful, and wishing you the best.